Well, Jonah, thanks so much for coming on the program tonight. Good talking to you, sir.
Great to be here.
And congratulations on the release of the brand new book, The Tyranny of Cliches. I actually did run out to the bookstore on Tuesday, and I picked this up on my way into work. I just finished it last night, and I got to tell you, I was a huge fan of liberal fascism. This is not the sequel to liberal fascism, but it is a fantastic book, and I think it is so timely, especially as more and more of us get involved in the social media and we start to get this. We see these cliches every day, from the trolls, frankly, on Twitter and on Facebook and elsewhere.
Yeah, I know. The way I try to explain it to people, because it's funny, I get a lot of complaints from people about how liberal fascism wasn't funny. And then I come out with a book that's a good deal funnier than liberal fascism, and everyone's like, how come this isn't the sequel to liberal fascism? And I sort of can't win. And the way I kind of explain it to people is that I see this as, in some ways, kind of like the liner notes to liberal fascism. If you've read it, you can tell, there's a lot of stuff that I learned while working on liberal fascism. My abiding hatred for the philosophical school of pragmatism was gleaned from my work on liberal fascism. And in some ways, you can call liberal fascism a prequel to this, because all liberal fascism really was an attempt to deconstruct what I found to be the most infuriating cliche of them all, which is that free market, liberty-loving conservatives in the Anglo-American tradition are fascists. Mm-hmm. And and I've been saying for years the best working definition of a fascist is simply a conservative who's winning an argument. And so the cliches in this book are the other sort of unquestioned, uncritical assumptions that are passed on and taught to all Americans, but are most dearly held by progressives and liberals, that reinforce their worldview without actually making an argument for it.
And I got to tell you, there are a number of chapters that I think speak specifically to our audience of gun owners. Violence never solves anything, chapter 16. But the one that really stuck out at me, Jonah, I got to tell you, is chapter 12, when you talk about community and how the idea of community has changed over the years. And it really got me thinking, like, among the modern left, is there an area of our day-to-day lives where they don't feel like the federal government needs to not just be involved, but to be the overriding influence in our lives? Right.
I mean, it's sort of like, no frills brands that were first showed up in supermarkets that just said things like cheese product, that had no branding to them.
Right.
Liberals tend to use words like community, unity, that kind of thing, as stand-ins for what they really mean, which is statism, right? And so they use this flowery language about community. Government is just the word we use for those things that we do together. And Obama has this line where he says, if any American has a problem, it's everybody's problem. To which my response is, I have a bad rotator cuff, so is that everyone's problem? My toilet keeps backing up. Is that everyone's problem?
Well, yeah, and I mean, I hate to bring up Sandra Fluke, but I was thinking about this yesterday. If Sandra Fluke is entitled to free birth control, does that mean that somebody else is entitled to free IVF? Do we have a right to free fertilization if we have a right to free birth control? I mean, this idea that we're all in it together, Jonah, and your problems are my problems, and so I've got to help you out. When it's artificial, when it comes from the federal government, I'm glad that I live in a neighborhood where actually, we do watch out for each other, but it's organic. These are real relationships.
That's right. One of the cliches that I really hate the most is dedicate ourselves to causes larger than ourselves, right? which you hear from McCain as much as you hear from Obama, right? It is sort of a standard elite pro-government formulation. And the reality is that I've never met anybody who isn't dedicated to causes larger than themselves. The only person I can think of in all the world is Hannibal Lecter, who has no causes larger than himself. And even he started to like Clarice in the end. The truth is, your family is a cause larger than yourself. I mean, you, first and foremost, more than anything else, you would take a bullet for your family. Mm-hmm. Your community, the Constitution, gun rights, your radio show, the Republican Party, National Review, your church, your synagogue. I mean, these are all causes, large and small, that are larger than your individual self. But when politicians say it, they invariably mean you need, if you're not dedicated to a cause larger than yourself, then you're not dedicated to, if you're not dedicated to the government and a government-driven program,
right,
and a government-driven agenda, then you're being selfish,
yeah,
which is a disgusting formulation if you think it through.
Absolutely. Well, this is why, I think we've gone overboard in terms of subtitles on books, but I actually will make an exception in your case, because I think the subtitle is very important. How liberals cheat in the war of ideas, because, as you say, they rely on these cliches, and conservatives should not rely on cliches either. I mean, part of what makes conservatives, I think, a more thoughtful group is that we actually have some history that we're not ashamed of. We have a tradition that we can fall back on, as opposed to making it up as they go along. When you cheat in the argument, you don't have to have anything. You just rely on these cliches, and then I guess resort to name calling at worst, right?
Right. I mean, and again, this is like the chief criticism I've gotten so far of my book from liberals who haven't read it is, conservatives use cliches too. Conservatives use buzz phrases. Conservatives say government that governs least governs best. That's a cliche, and they're all right that these are all that they're cliches and that conservatives use cliches. But the difference is, the real key difference, which is sort of the underlying theme of the book, is conservatives and libertarians, and to be fair, serious socialists and Marxists, we admit we have an ideology. We're upfront about what our preferences are, what our priorities are, what our agenda is. And, the conservative ideology is pretty obvious. We argue about it all the time. It's free markets, limited government. If you're a social conservative, it's the whole suite of social issues. We're not hiding anything. What liberals do is they say they don't believe in ideology, that they don't have any dogma. They're just clear-eyed realists who deal with the facts and just want to do good. And that's how they cheat, is by pretending that they don't have an ideological agenda, and when that ideological agenda manifests itself in all of these cliched tropes and thoughts and argument or quasi-arguments and Trojan horses that sort of seize territory unearned by argument.
Well, Jonah, listen, I really appreciate you coming on the program, sir. I got to tell you, like I said, huge fan of liberal fascism. I think if folks want to learn a great deal of history about the last 150 years, they could do a lot worse than reading Russell Kirk's The Conservative Mind and your book back to back. I think The Tyranny of Cliches is fantastic. It is rare that there is a serious book out there that can actually make you laugh out loud, but I did so on page 30, so I think you've done a fantastic job. Thank you for your time, sir, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Jonah Goldberg, author of the brand new book, The Tyranny of Cliches, How Liberals Cheat in the War of Ideas. Join us here tonight on Cam & Company.